Have you ever heard of the medical concept of a phantom limb?
I have, yeah. It's that fascinating and frankly deeply unsettling phenomenon where an amputee can still feel sensations.
Right.
And not just sensations, but often excruciating pain, itching, even cramping,
Oh.
all in a limb that has been, physically removed.
Exactly. The arm or the leg is gone, but the brain insists with absolute certainty that it's still there.
It's still there and it's still hurting.
It's a sensation of something that is physically absent but psychically dominating. It takes up space, it demands attention, even though it doesn't exist in material reality. Now, I want you to take that concept and just move it from the physical body to the human psyche. Imagine feeling the dominating, overwhelming presence of a person who isn't there.
That is a really profound way to frame it.
That's the central paradox we're going to be grappling with today. How can someone who is absent, a father who left, or a father who died, or maybe the most confusing of all, a father who is sitting right there in the living room, but emotionally just checked out, how can that absence take up so much space in a daughter's life?
It creates a vacuum.
Yeah.
But, physics tells us nature abhors a vacuum. It isn't just an empty space where nothing exists.
No.
It's a force. It's an active suction that pulls everything else into it.
So today we're doing a deep dive into the work of Jungian analyst Susan E. Schwartz, specifically her book, The Absent Father Effect on Daughters. We're going to unpack how this gap shapes a woman's body, her mind, her relationships, and her very soul. And let me tell you, the source material here is dense. It's heavy, but it is incredibly illuminating.
It really is. And to set the stage properly, we have to define what we mean by absence in this context, because Schwartz isn't just talking about the father who packs a bag and leaves town.
Right, it's not always that straightforward.
Not at all, although that is certainly part of it. No, we're looking at the emotionally absent father. The father who might be physically present. He comes home at 6, he eats dinner, he watches the news, but psychologically,
He's a million miles away.
he's unreachable. He's, in a way, dead to the daughter's emotional needs. He might be critical, or he might just be a ghost in his own house. Schwartz uses this phrase that I think is just crucial for this whole discussion: the presence of absence.
The presence of absence, that is haunting.
It is. It implies that the absence isn't just a nothingness, it's an active force. It creates a gap, a void that takes up psychic space. And because we're looking at this through a Jungian lens, we're not just talking about behavior.
No, this goes deeper.
Much deeper. We're talking about the unconscious, we're talking about dreams, and we're talking about archetypes.
And that's what makes this particular deep dive so interesting. We're not just going to list symptoms or behaviors. We're actually going to look at dreams. We're going to analyze some incredibly vivid, sometimes terrifying dreams from the women in Schwartz's case studies to understand what's happening deep in the plumbing of the psyche.
Exactly. The goal here is to understand how that outer relationship with the father, or, the lack of a relationship, shapes the inner architecture of the daughter.
So our mission today is to explore this gap. We're going to talk about something called the dead father effect, a concept called the as-if personality, which I found just fascinating, and ultimately how a daughter can break this cycle to find her actual authentic self.
It's a journey from that void you mentioned to a kind of authenticity.
Let's start with the concept Schwartz introduces right at the beginning of her work, the parallax. Now, I looked this up to get the strict definition because I usually hear this in, like, astronomy or physics. The Oxford English Dictionary defines parallax as the apparent displacement of an object caused by a change in the observer's position.
Right. It's a classic scientific principle. If you look at a clock from the extreme right, the time looks different than if you look at it straight on.
Or the old trick, hold your finger up in front of your face and close one eye then the other.
Yeah.
The finger seems to jump back and forth.
Exactly. Your finger hasn't moved, but your perspective has.
So why is she applying this term to the father-daughter relationship?
Yeah.
What's the connection?
She's using it as a metaphor for what needs to happen in therapy, or frankly in this deep dive itself. The daughter usually grows up with a myth about her father.
A myth? Like a story she tells herself.
Yes, a protective story. Maybe the myth is, he's a great man, he's just really busy. Or he loves me, he just has a hard time showing it. Or even, he was a monster and I escaped. That's one angle, one position of the observer.
Okay.
But to heal, the daughter needs a parallax shift. She needs to move her position. She needs to look at the situation from a new angle to see the reality of the wound.
So she has to stop looking at the myth and start looking at the damage.
Precisely. It's a necessary shift to see the catastrophe clearly. And speaking of myths, Schwartz anchors this entire concept in a very famous, very tragic Greek myth, the story of Agamemnon and his daughter, Iphigenia.
I remember this one vaguely from school. This is tied to the Trojan War, isn't it?
It's the prelude to it. It's the event that allows the war to happen. Agamemnon is the king, the father. He wants to sail to Troy to make war and gain glory for himself and for Greece. But the wings are dead. The ships can't sail.
Okay, so he's stuck.
He's stuck. And a seer tells him that to get the winds to blow, he has to sacrifice his daughter Iphigenia to the goddess Artemis.
That is the ultimate betrayal.
It gets worse. He doesn't just grab her and drag her to the altar. He lies to her. He sends a message home telling her to come to the port because she is going to marry the great hero Achilles.
Oh, no.
So she comes full of joy and expectation of a wedding, a future, a new life, and instead she is slaughtered on the altar by her own father just so he can get favorable winds for his war.
That is horrific. But symbolically, what are we saying here?
Yeah.
I mean, most fathers aren't literally sacrificing their daughters.
No, of course not. Symbolically, it represents the archetypal betrayal. The father prioritizes his ambition, his glory, his war, whatever that might be in a modern context, his job, his addiction, his depression, his new family. He prioritizes that over the daughter's life.
Her aliveness.
Her aliveness is psychologically killed for the father's benefit. Her needs, her spirit, her sense of self are sacrificed so he can have his way.
And in the modern context, this usually isn't a singular dramatic event like a sacrifice on an altar. Schwartz talks about the catastrophe of absence being something different.
Exactly. It's rarely one big explosion. It's a slow accumulation of non-events.
Non-events. What do you mean by that?
I mean, it's the times he didn't look up from the paper, the times he didn't ask how her day was, the school plays he missed, the times he walked out of the room when she started crying. It's a death by 1,000 cuts, 1,000 moments where the father fails to reflect a separate individual self back to the daughter.
And the consequence of that is what just destroys me. The source says the daughter turns that frustration, that disappointment, inward. She doesn't say, my dad is a jerk.
No, a child can't really do that. You know, it's too terrifying to believe your caregiver, your source of survival, is flawed or dangerous. It would shatter her world. So she has to find another explanation.
And the explanation is her.
Yes. She internalizes it. She feels she is bad. She feels she is unworthy of love. The logic is, if he isn't looking at me, it must be because there's nothing here worth looking at.
And this creates a really strange paradox, doesn't it? Because you would think if someone ignores you, you'd eventually just ignore them back.
Yeah.
Give up. But Schwartz describes a fascination.
It's a powerful and counterintuitive idea. It's the fascination of the starving person for the empty plate. The daughter becomes riveted to the father because he is withholding.
So the absence itself becomes the focus.
It becomes the entire focus. She orients her whole life around the source of nourishment that isn't feeding her, hoping that if she just stares hard enough or behaves well enough or is perfect enough, the food will finally appear.
Let's make this more concrete. There's a case study in the book of a woman named Jade. Her story seems to be a classic example of this.
Jade is a perfect example. Her father left when she was 3 years old. Now, Jade grew up to be a super high achiever. On the outside, she is competent, polished, successful.
She's the CEO, the woman who has it all together.
Exactly. But the book makes it clear that this is a compensation. She became a high achiever to subconsciously prove she was worth sticking around for, even though he was already long gone.
Yeah.
It's like she's sending a signal to a ghost.
But inside, it's a different story.
Completely. Schwartz describes her as having a secret core. Outwardly, she's polished. Inwardly, she is frantic. She compartmentalized her life. She had her work life, her social life, her romantic life. And none of them could ever touch, because if they did, someone might see the mess inside.
And then she has this reunion with him in her teens, right? That must have been a huge moment.
It was. And this is a pivotal, often crushing moment that happens to so many women in this situation. She finally gets to meet him. She's carried this longing, this fascination, this entire narrative for years. She expects a movie moment, closure, recognition.
And that's not what she gets.
Not even close. She realizes he doesn't share her longing. He's indifferent. The reunion is just a casual, unremarkable event for him. The intensity was entirely on her side.
That has to be absolutely devastating. To have this whole inner world built around someone and then realize they don't even know that world exists.
It caused an emotional shutdown for her. The disappointment was so crushing. And the pattern that established itself from that point on was that Jade became exclusively attracted to emotionally unavailable men.
Ah, so she's trying to fix the original wound.
She kept trying to redo the ending with her father. She would find men who were just as withholding, just as distant, and she would work tirelessly to win their affection.
It's like she's trying to solve a puzzle, but she keeps buying the exact same puzzle that she already knows has the missing pieces.
That is a perfect analogy. She's stuck in a loop of repetition. And this leads us directly into one of the most potent and, I think, most important concepts in the book, the dead father effect.
This sounds like a horror movie title, but it's actually a serious psychoanalytic theory.
It is, yeah. It comes from the brilliant French psychoanalyst André Green. He originally wrote about the dead mother, but Schwartz applies the same logic to the father. And we have to be really clear. Dead here does not necessarily mean physically deceased.
Right, we said this earlier. He's walking around, breathing, going to work.
Correct. But he is emotionally deadened. He might be depressed, he might be withdrawn, narcissistic, or just completely checked out from the emotional life of the family. Schwartz describes him as a psychic ruin.
A psychic ruin. Wow, so how does a daughter connect with a ruin? How does a child form a bond with that?
Well, that's the tragedy. To connect with a deadened father, the daughter deadens herself. It's a profound, unconscious mechanism of mimicry.
She mimics his deadness. Why?
She mimics his stillness. She mimics his depression. Because if she is lively and vibrant and full of needs, she is too different. The gap between them is too large. She might lose the bond entirely. So she suppresses her own aliveness to maintain a connection with his deadness.
That is absolutely heartbreaking. She basically has to play possum to stay close to him. She has to pretend to be dead, to be loved by the dead.
And André Green describes the result of this as a gap or a void in the daughter's psyche. He says the father looks at the daughter but doesn't see her. His gaze is blank.
We talk a lot in modern psychology about being seen in relationships. Why is that parental gaze so fundamentally important?
Because for a child, the parent's face is the first mirror. When you look into your parent's eyes, you should see yourself reflected with delight. The look should say, oh, there you are, you exist, you are wonderful. That's how we learn we exist and that we are good.
But if the mirror is blank, if the father looks right through you,
then the daughter cannot find her image. She feels she doesn't exist. Or worse, she feels that what does exist is invisible or worthless.
This brings us to another case study, a woman named Shiloh. Her story really illustrates this mirror concept in a very literal, painful way.
Yes, Shiloh's case is very powerful. She had an obsession with mirrors. She would stare into them constantly for hours. She also had dermatillomania, a skin-picking compulsion.
Which sounds incredibly painful and distressing.
It is, but think about the symbolism here. She is looking in the mirror, desperately trying to find the self that the father never reflected. She's trying to prove to herself that she's real.
But what does she see when she looks?
Because she has internalized his blank or perhaps critical gaze, when she looks in the mirror, she doesn't see a whole person. She only sees flaws. She sees the shadow. She picks at her skin to try and fix the imperfection, to remove the badness so that she might finally be seen and acceptable.
The source also mentions André Green's concept of the glass wall in relation to Shiloh.
Yes. Shiloh described feeling a barrier between herself and other people. She could see them out there, living their lives, connecting, but she couldn't. She couldn't touch them or feel connected to them. That is the dead father effect. You're entombed in glass, able to see life, but not participate in it.
Shiloh had a dream that really vividly captures this sense of being trapped. I want to unpack this box dream. It's quite something.
This is a terrifying dream, and it's a perfect illustration of her inner state. She dreams she climbs into a box that has no top. She thinks she's escaped, but she climbs out only to find herself in another identical box.
The loop?
A loop. Then she goes down a slide, winding around and around, thinking she's going somewhere new, only to be dropped right back into the very same box. But this time, the box is lined with mirrors.
Mirrors everywhere.
On every surface. And all she can see, no matter where she looks, is herself looking back at herself.
That sounds like a nightmare of narcissism. Just trapped with yourself?
It is, but we have to be careful with that word. In the Jungian sense that Schwartz is using, this kind of narcissism isn't just vanity or self-love. It's a closed loop born of neglect.
What do you mean by that?
Because she received no external reflection from a loving father, she is trapped in a state of forced self-reflection. She is watching herself because no one else ever watched her. It's a lonely, cold, closed circuit.
So she's trapped in a box of mirrors because the original mirror, the father, was broken or missing.
Exactly. And not only that, but she also takes on the father's unconscious wounds. In a way, the daughter becomes the carrier of his depression, his deadness. It's transferred to her.
This leads us right into the next section, which goes deeper on this idea of the mirror and the self. We've established that the father's gaze validates the daughter. But what happens when that validation is missing? You just mentioned narcissism as a defense.
Yes, and I think it's important to expand on that because we often judge narcissism so harshly in our culture as just being arrogant or full of oneself. But Schwartz, drawing on Jungian thought, argues that in this context, narcissism is a defense against the terror of fragmentation.
Fragmentation, you mean like literally falling apart?
Psychologically, yes. If you aren't held in the mind and heart of a loving parent, you feel like you might dissolve into nothingness. There's no container for your identity. So the daughter has to create her own container, a false self, a hard, brittle shell to hold herself together.
And the focus on herself is what maintains that shell.
Yes, she obsessively focuses on herself, not because she loves herself. In fact, she often loathes herself, but because she has to constantly monitor herself to survive. It's hypervigilance turned inward.
So the perfectionism we see is part of that.
It's a huge part of it. She strives for perfection, perfect skin, perfect weight, perfect grades, perfect career, to hide the defective self she believes exists underneath. The mask has to be flawless because she's terrified of what's behind it.
Let's talk about Grace. She's another woman profiled in the book. Her story is fascinating because it involves her husband, but it clearly links right back to the dynamic with her father.
Grace's dynamic was that she was constantly trying to enliven a depressed husband. She was married to a man who was emotionally dead, just like her father had been, and she spent all of her energy, all of her life force trying to wake him up, trying to cheer him up, trying to pump life into him.
She's completely replicating her childhood role.
Exactly, trying to get a different outcome this time. And she had a dream that is so industrial and chilling. It really shows the mechanics of this dynamic. She called it the machine dream.
Tell us about that one.
She dreams of a massive claw machine, like the ones you see at an arcade. But instead of stuffed animals, it's picking up these life-size dummies and repeatedly dunking them into a vat of water.
Okay, that's already a disturbing image.
It is. But here's the part that reveals everything. Grace sees this happening and she voluntarily jumps in line to be dunked next.
She volunteers to be treated like a dummy by a machine.
She jumps in line. It shows how completely compliant she has become to this deadening process. She has become mechanical to fit into her father's and now her husband's deadened world. The water in the dream represents drowning in the unconscious, drowning in the depression of the partner. And she's willing to be drowned just to be part of the machine, to belong somewhere.
That's profound. She would rather be a dummy in a claw machine than be alone and alive.
But Grace's story is so important because it has a turning point. After years of this, she eventually finds the strength to divorce this dead marriage, and she has a subsequent dream that signals a profound healing. This is the tea dream.
This one sounds much more pleasant, thankfully.
It is. It's a beautiful dream. She dreams of an older man with mandala tattoos on his arms. Now, in Jungian psychology, the mandala, the circle, is a powerful symbol of wholeness and integration.
Okay, so he's a positive figure.
Very positive. This man offers her a cup of tea, and as he hands it to her, he says, "You are the first who doesn't forget."
You are the first who doesn't forget. What does that mean in this context?
It suggests she is finally remembering herself. She's forgetting the compulsion to save others and remembering to nourish herself. She's waking up from the trance. And this older man represents a positive inner masculine figure emerging in her psyche.
Not the dead father or the machine husband.
Exactly. This figure is offering nourishment, which is the tea, and wisdom. He is a guide. It's a clear sign that the process of healing is beginning for her.
It's really interesting that the healing figure is still a male figure.
That is so important. In Jungian psychology, a woman has an inner masculine aspect called the animus. Now, if her external real-life father was bad, absent, critical, deadened, her internal animus is usually negative as well. It becomes that inner critical voice, the inner punisher.
The inner tyrant.
The inner tyrant.
Yeah.
Healing involves transforming that inner figure from a tyrant into a positive ally. The man with the tattoos is that positive ally emerging. He's the new inner masculine.
Speaking of the negative ally, or really the enemy within, we need to talk about the negative father complex. This seems to be the engine driving a lot of this suffering.
It really is. This is the heavy lifter of the psyche here. A complex, in simple Jungian terms, is an emotionally charged group of ideas and images in the unconscious. It's like a knot of psychic energy that has its own agenda.
And when it's a negative father complex, what does that look like in a person's life?
It acts like an internal demon or a tyrant. It's that relentless voice in your head that says, you can't do this, you're stupid, you're going to fail, you're unsafe. The symptoms that bubble up to the surface are things like intense self-criticism, chronic anxiety, a feeling of paralysis, and crucially, an attraction to cruel or withholding authority figures.
You're just drawn to people who treat you the way the complex does.
Yes, because it feels familiar. And Schwartz makes a critical point. This complex has autonomy. It can possess the daughter.
That sounds terrifying. What does possess mean here?
It means the complex can take over the driver's seat of the personality. The daughter might find herself acting against her own best interests, sabotaging a great job opportunity, ruining a healthy relationship, because the internalized father forbids her success or happiness. She is, for a time, possessed by his negativity.
There's a term used in the source here that is very evocative. The demon lover.
Yes, the daughter can become seduced by the darkness and sadness of the father. It sounds strange to an outsider, but if darkness and neglect are what you know as love, then real warmth and light can feel scary and alien. The familiar darkness feels like home.
We have a case study of a woman named Raylan. She had some very specific, very telling dreams that illustrate this complex perfectly. Let's start with the St. Louis dream.
This is a classic example of how the unconscious uses puns and wordplay in dreams. Raylan dreams that she agrees to marry a man who is younger than her, unattractive, and very immature. And he's from the city of St. Louis.
Okay, so what's the significance of St. Louis?
Her father's name was Louis.
Ah, of course.
So she is marrying St. Louis. She's sanctifying him. It's a kind of psychological incest, as Schwartz puts it. She's marrying herself to the immaturity and inadequacy of her own father. The dream is a stark warning. You are married to your father's issues. You are erasing your own identity to follow his broken path.
She also had a serial killer dream, which sounds even more intense.
In this dream, she knows a serial killer is loose in the community. But instead of feeling fear, she feels an overwhelming sense of guilt for not warning the other potential victims.
But why does she feel guilty? She's not the killer.
That is the core distortion of the complex. She takes on the responsibility for the father's psychological violence. The serial killer in the dream is the negative father complex. It is killing her creative spirit, her aliveness, her potential relationships. But instead of fighting it or being angry at it, she feels guilty. It shows how the complex twists reality to make her the one at fault.
Then there's another case, Kelly. Her father's described in no uncertain terms as a thug.
Yes, a thug. Cruel, absent, and dangerous. Kaylee's response was to develop a femme fatale persona. She became a chameleon, trying to please men by being whatever she thought they wanted. But it was a fragile mask, and she would inevitably collapse into periods of self-destruction.
And she had a dream about being frozen.
A very simple but powerful dream. She dreamt she was at work and was literally frozen, unable to move past a boss figure who was blocking her path.
Just frozen.
Paralysis. It's a perfect image. The negative father complex, personified as the authoritarian boss, blocks her ambition. She cannot move forward in the world. She can't succeed because the internal father stands in the doorway and says, "Stop, you're not allowed."
It's incredible how these dreams are so literal and so clear once you have the key to unlock their language.
They are the psyche screaming for attention, trying to make the unconscious conscious.
Let's move on to Section 5. This is a term I hadn't heard before, and I found it so unsettling. The as-if personality.
It's a concept that originally comes from the psychoanalyst Helene Deutsch, and it is unsettling. It describes a woman who feels fraudulent. She mimics what a real person does. She goes to work, she has friends, she gets married, but she feels hollow inside. She is acting as if she is a person with genuine feelings and a solid core.
That is so chilling. It's like being an alien who has studied human behavior in textbooks and is trying to blend in without being discovered.
That is exactly how many of these women describe the feeling. Because there was a fundamental lack of maternal and paternal devotion at the core, a real organic personality didn't form. So she has to construct a personality out of scraps lines from books, behaviors she observes in her friends' parents, characters she sees in movies.
And this source points out again that these women are often outwardly very successful.
Yes, and that makes it so much harder to spot, both for others and for themselves. They are highly functional, They are often mild, amiable, and agreeable, but inwardly they are completely detached. There's no genuine emotional depth, or if there is, it's hidden so deeply they can't access it themselves.
Another famous analyst, D.W. Winnicott, observed that academic success often hides deep emotional distress.
Right. And for the as-if person, the more successful she becomes, the more phony she feels. There's a constant nagging terror. If they really knew me, the empty me inside, they would be horrified and they would leave me.
Let's talk about Tiffany. Her case is a powerful illustration. She basically admitted that she learned how to be a person from reading books because her father gave her absolutely no guidance or reflection.
And Tiffany had a horrific recurring dream that embodies the trauma at the core of this, the branding dream.
This one was genuinely tough to read.
She dreams her father puts his hand on her thigh and it's so hot that it burns her flesh right down to the bone. He is literally branding her.
Like cattle, a mark of ownership.
Exactly. It's a mark of his ownership and his damage. But here's the kicker, the part that shows the psychological defense. In the dream, she looks at this gaping, burned wound, and she thinks about filling it with concrete.
With concrete, not with medicine or bandages.
With concrete. Concrete is hard, heavy, inert, dead. It represents a total hardening and deadening of her feelings. To survive the pain of the brand, the trauma, she has to fill the wound with something that feels nothing. It is a symbolic loss of her soft, living humanity just to survive.
She also had a blue light dream, which represented a shift for her.
It did. It was a breakthrough. After a lot of work, she dreams of seeing her father with a third eye that emits a blue light. And in the dream, she has the sudden realization. She had idealized him, turned him into a guru or a god with a magic third eye to deny her own fear.
So she made him into a god because the reality that he was a source of fear and pain was too much to handle. The dream is breaking that illusion.
It's the beginning of that parallax shift we talked about, seeing him for what he was, not what she needed him to be.
Then we have Sydney. She was so aware of this dynamic that she actually called herself the poseur.
Yes, the poser. She felt she had missed the distribution of the manual on how to be a person. She maintained a perfect appearance, a perfect home, as a way to ward off real intimacy. And she had a dream about Old King Cole.
The nursery rhyme character, that seems whimsical compared to the others.
It seems that way, but it's actually deeply tragic. She dreams her father is Old King Cole, jolly, happy, oblivious, the center of everyone's attention, a merry old soul.
Okay. And where is Sydney in the dream?
Sydney is frantically running around, packing gifts into boxes. She's desperate to get them packed before they disappear. And she has this dreadful knowledge that her father's wife, her stepmother, is going to come in and ruin everything.
So what does this tell us?
The father is the king of her psyche. But he's an oblivious, self-absorbed king. He's just having a party while she is doing all the frantic emotional labor in the background. She's protecting his gifts, his fragile ego, his happiness, at her own expense. She creates what Schwartz calls a pocket in her mind, where all the trauma and frantic energy lives, while the rest of her personality pretends to be fine, just like the merry old king.
That pocket concept is so visual. It's like carrying around a piece of radioactive uranium in your pocket while you're smiling and making small talk at a dinner party.
And eventually that radiation burns through. It manifests as autoimmune diseases, eating disorders, depression. That's usually when they finally come to therapy.
So far, we've been talking mostly about the personal father, the man in the living room. Since we're doing a Jungian deep dive, we had to zoom out to the biggest picture possible. We have to talk about the archetypes.
Right. This is where it gets really big. Jungians believe that beneath our personal unconscious, there's a collective unconscious, filled with universal energies or patterns that are common to all humanity. These are the archetypes. The father is one of the most powerful archetypes. It represents authority, law, order, the sky, spirit.
So how does the personal father, my actual dad, relate to this massive universal archetype?
Think of the personal father as a filter or a mediator. He is supposed to take that massive, impersonal, sometimes terrifying archetypal energy of the father and humanize it for the child. If the personal father is present and loving, he makes the father energy feel safe and manageable.
But if he's absent or weak?
Then the daughter is exposed to the raw, unfiltered, overwhelming energy of the archetype itself.
So instead of just getting a flawed dad, she gets a god or a monster.
Exactly. There is no human middle ground. The father image becomes exaggerated, inflated. He's either the all-powerful, perfect savior who can do no wrong, or he's the all-consuming, terrifying tyrant who will destroy her.
And this is where the wider cultural, the patriarchal context comes in, right?
You can't ignore the culture. Traditional patriarchy often defines the father's role as the distant authority, the lawgiver, the provider. It often excludes emotional nurturance from the job description. So the culture itself can reinforce and even encourage the absent father.
There's a biblical story mentioned in the source that's another one of these archetypal betrayals, Jephthah's daughter.
Another tragic story of a daughter sacrificed for a father's ambition. Jephthah is a warrior who makes a rash vow to God that if he wins his next battle, he will sacrifice the first thing that comes out of his house to greet him upon his return.
And of course, it's his daughter, his only child.
Of course. She comes out dancing with tambourines to celebrate his victory, and he has to follow through on his vow.
And her reaction is what's significant here.
Yes, she accepts her fate. But she asks for one thing first. Let me go to the mountains for 2 months and mourn my virginity with my friends.
So the mourning. It's the mourning of her own life, her own future.
It is. She has to mourn her own life because her father prioritized his vow, his public image, his word, his success over her very existence. It's an archetype of the daughter paying the ultimate price for the father's rigid adherence to external rules and his own ego.
Let's look at the case study of 80. The source says she had some very archetypal, larger-than-life dreams.
80's dreams were intense. She dreamt of a sadistic father figure who was chasing her and a group of children. But he wasn't just a man. He had supernatural powers. He could jump over any fence and merge through walls.
That sounds terrifying. No boundaries can stop him. He's not bound by the laws of physics.
Exactly. That's the archetypal aspect. When the complex is this powerful, the negative father has no boundaries. He can intrude into her psyche whenever he wants. There's no fence high enough to keep him out.
She also dreamt of a gremlin, which is an interesting figure.
The gremlin. This is the trickster archetype. In her dream, he's seductive. He's not overtly threatening. He offers her special powers if she agrees to stay with him in his dark, underground world.
But there's a catch, I assume.
There is always a catch with the trickster. He is the demon lover we mentioned earlier. He offers power, but at the cost of her soul and her art. It's the temptation to align with the negative, destructive power to feel strong, rather than doing the hard, painful work of finding your own authentic strength.
But like Grace, 80 eventually has a turning point dream, the wizard dream.
This is the hopeful shift. She dreams that her family is being threatened by evil forces, so they go to a good wizard for help. The wizard speaks a foreign, magical language, and he performs a ritual called the arrangement.
So the wizard is a positive masculine archetype then?
Yes. After being terrorized by the sadistic father and tempted by the gremlin, she is finally accessing a positive masculine archetype. A helper, a guide, a source of wisdom. She is finding a new, healthier arrangement within her own psyche to counter the negative personal father.
This transitions us perfectly to the final and maybe most important section.
Yeah.
Healing and repair. We've painted a pretty stark picture of the damage here. The voids, the concrete, the gremlins, the serial killers. How does a woman even begin to heal from this?
Well, the first thing Schwartz emphasizes is the goal of therapy, or any healing journey. And the goal is not to fix the father.
Right. He might never change.
He might be dead. Or he might just be completely incapable of change. Chasing that is just another version of trying to get blood from a stone. No, the goal is to deconstruct the dead self that was built for survival and discover the living self underneath.
It's an internal job.
Entirely. It's about moving from viewing that absence as a scary, empty void to viewing it as a space for potential.
That's a huge cognitive and emotional shift from something is missing and wrong with me to I have an empty canvas to build something new for myself.
Exactly. But to get there, you have to do the hardest part first. You have to mourn.
Mourning. We keep coming back to that word. Jephthah's daughter, now this.
You have to mourn the father you never had. You have to truly, deeply grieve for the dad you needed and deserved but didn't get. It means giving up the hope that he will suddenly wake up and be that dad. You have to stop trying to resuscitate the dead father.
That sounds incredibly painful. To consciously give up hope.
It is the most painful part of the process, because that hope has been a survival strategy for decades. But it's necessary. As long as you are still trying to wake him up, you are staying asleep yourself, trapped in that old dynamic. Acknowledging the grief is what allows the frozen parts of the psyche to finally thaw.
And with that thawing comes anger, I would imagine.
Oh, yes. A lot of anger. Schwartz talks about the crucial journey of moving from depression to expression. Depression, in many cases, is anger that has been turned inward against the self. Healing means allowing that anger to turn outward, not necessarily by yelling at him, but by recognizing and validating it. I have a right to be angry that I was neglected. My anger is a sign of my life force returning. It's about breaking the silence that the absent father imposed.
We touched on the animus earlier, the inner masculine. How does reclaiming that figure play a role in healing?
It's central. When the external father is absent or negative, the daughter's inner masculine, her ability to set boundaries, to be assertive, to think logically, to take action in the world, is often damaged. It becomes critical and self-sabotaging. Healing involves consciously developing a positive animus.
Like the good wizard or the man with the tattoos?
Exactly. She learns to cultivate an inner ally. So instead of an inner voice saying, "You aren't good enough to apply for that job," the new positive inner masculine starts saying, "I will protect you and support you while you take this risk. I'll help you build the structure for your dreams."
So she uses that masculine energy for creativity and self-care, rather than self-attack.
Precisely.
The source describes the final state, the goal, as becoming a differentiated unity.
That's a bit of a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, yeah.
What does it mean in plain English?
It means she is no longer defined by the father, either by desperately trying to comply with him or by constantly rebelling against him. Both of those are still being in relation to him.
So she's finally off the hook.
She's off the hook. She becomes a unity unto herself. She moves from being a daughter of the father to being her own woman. And to bring it full circle, she learns to see herself in her own mirror and to like what she sees, not because he would approve, but because it's her. She's no longer looking for his reflection.
That is a powerful, powerful image, looking in the mirror and seeing you, not the absence of him.
That is the ultimate freedom.
So, to summarize this entire deep dive, we've tracked a journey from the as-if life, feeling fraudulent, living in a void, mimicking what you think life is supposed to look like, to a state of authenticity.
It's moving from the constant pain of the phantom limb of the father to finally standing on your own 2 feet, feeling the solid ground beneath you.
It's a journey from the dead father to the living daughter.
I want to leave our listeners with a final provocative thought from the source material. Near the end, Schwartz writes something that really stopped me in my tracks. She says, absence is also significantly a call for the potential of the positive to emerge.
Yes, that's a crucial reframe.
Think about that for a moment. The hole left by the father is painful. It is the source of so much suffering, but is also the specific shape of your future creativity. So the question becomes, what grows in that gap when we stop trying to fill it with the ghosts of the father?
That is the question, isn't it? The wound is the place where the light enters, to paraphrase Rumi. If you stop filling that void with concrete, what might grow there instead?
A garden, a fortress of your own making, a piece of art.
A soul, your own soul.
A soul. I love that. A perfect place to end. Thank you for guiding us through this heavy but absolutely essential terrain today.
It was a real privilege.
And to you, the listener, look at your own mirrors with kindness today. We will see you on the next deep dive.
Goodbye, everyone.